I still remember the day it happened. I was in the living room, folding a few old clothes and trying to make space in the cupboard. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. My son, his wife, and her sister were in the kitchen, talking softly. At first, I did not pay attention. Families talk, people whisper, but something in their tone felt different, like a thin thread pulling at my heart. I walked toward my room, and as I reached the hallway, I heard my name. I paused. My heart slowed. I was not trying to eavesdrop, but the words floated through the air, sharper than knives. She is too old, my daughter-in-law whispered. She makes the house feel heavy. Her sister sighed. Why keep her here? She has no job, no energy. She just sits quietly and watches everything. They laughed softly, a small, tired laugh. It sounded so cold. My son did not say anything at first. I waited, hoping he would defend me, even one sentence, even one soft word. Instead, he said quietly, I know, but she has nowhere else to go. My heart sank. I did not need a loud voice to hurt me. Those soft, defeated words cut deeper. I took a step back, careful not to be heard. My hands shook, but I pressed them against my sides. Holding myself together, I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my hands. They were wrinkled, tired, and shaking. I thought about everything I had done, all the lunches packed, all the nights awake with fever, the school fees, the warmth, the quiet prayers whispered for his success. I had never asked for anything in return. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt forgotten, like an old book placed back on a shelf, gathering dust. When dinner time came, I walked to the kitchen. I smiled, gentle and soft. They looked at me as if nothing had happened. I served the rice, placed the plates, and sat in silence. That silence was heavy, but I carried it like a blanket on my shoulders. Later that night, while everyone slept, I walked to the kitchen to drink water. On the way back, I stopped in that same hallway. I placed my hand on the wall and breathed. Yes, I whispered to myself. I heard every word. A single tear fell. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet drop on the floor. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not anger, but realization. I was not wanted, not anymore, and yet, I was still here. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support my channel and help more stories find the people who need to hear them. The next morning, the house felt different. Nothing had changed on the surface, but I could feel the distance like a cold draft slipping through the door. My daughter-in-law avoided my eyes, her sister stayed only for breakfast, and my son hurried to work with a soft, practiced smile. I watched them all and wondered if they knew I had heard. Maybe they could see it in the way I walked. Slower, heavier, I went to the kitchen and made tea, just like every day. The steam rose, warm and gentle, but my heart felt like it was wrapped in ice. I held the cup close, hoping the warmth would travel to my chest. It didn't. Tea. Later, I sat by the window. The sky was cloudy, but not angry, just tired. I watched children walk to school with their heavy bags and light laughter. Once, I used to hold my son's hand and walk him the same way. He was talkative then, full of dreams. Sometimes, he would squeeze my hand and say, Mama, never leave me. I smiled at the memory and took a deep breath. Around noon, my daughter-in-law entered the living room. She glanced at me, then at her phone. Auntie and I will go shopping later, she said flatly. We'll be back late. I nodded. Take care. She paused. Surprised I did not ask to join, but I knew better. My presence was no longer welcome. She left without another word. When the door closed, silence filled the room again. I walked around the house slowly, touching the furniture, wiping dust off picture frames. My fingers stopped on a family photo. My son on the day he graduated. I remembered staying up the whole night, sewing a badge on his gown because it was loose. I remembered crying quietly in the bathroom so no one would see. Love is funny. It never asks if you are tired. In the afternoon, I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner early, chopping vegetables, washing rice, simple tasks, but they kept my mind steady. I hummed softly, an old lullaby I used to sing. It made the memories softer, easier to hold. When they returned, the house filled with shopping bags and laughter. They smelled of new perfume and fresh makeup. My son looked at them, impressed, and asked, Had fun? His wife nodded proudly. Then her eyes drifted to the dining table. Oh, she said, you already cooked. I smiled gently. Yes, I thought you might be hungry. She hesitated, then sat. Her sister whispered something into her ear, and they giggled quietly. My son didn't hear, but I did. As we ate, I stayed silent. Silence can protect the heart, especially when words have sharp edges. That night, after the dishes were washed, I walked back to my room. I sat on the bed and hugged my shawl around me, thick and soft. I wondered how a house could be full and still feel empty. Still, I whispered to myself, I can endure this for a little longer. Even though a small voice inside asked, should I have to? Days began to blend into each other. Morning tea, silent meals, and long afternoons spent staring out the window. I tried to keep busy, but loneliness has a way of slowing time. The house was clean, organized, and warm, yet my heart felt abandoned. I told myself not to take their whispers too seriously, but each day, distance grew like dust gathering in corners. One evening, as I prepared dinner, I heard footsteps behind me. My daughter-in-law walked in and watched me silently as I chopped vegetables. Finally, she cleared her throat. Maybe you should rest more, she said softly. You don't need to cook every day. I smiled politely. Cooking makes me feel useful. She nodded without looking into my eyes. Just try not to get in the way. The words were gentle, but they carried a cold edge. I tucked them inside my heart and continued chopping, slower this time. She left the kitchen without another word. Later, at dinner, I placed the food gently on the table. My son complimented the dish, but before I could thank him, his wife interrupted. She didn't make anything difficult, she said. Anyone can make this. My son laughed, not understanding the bruise her comment left behind. I lowered my eyes and whispered, I'm glad you like it. After dinner, I reached for the dishes, but my daughter-in-law stopped me. Leave them, she sighed. You might break something. I froze, surprised. I had washed dishes for decades, without a single mistake, but I stepped back, quietly. Sometimes silence is easier than defending yourself. Later that night, as I walked past their room to get water, I heard voices again, soft, but clear enough. She just sits there, her sister said. It's uncomfortable. She watches everything. My daughter-in-law replied, I wish she would consider living somewhere else. My heart dropped. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My son's voice was faintly heard. It's difficult, he whispered. She raised me, but maybe she will understand. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was gone again. But I heard, and I felt the words settle in my chest like heavy stones. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed. The walls felt closer, like they were listening too. I looked at my suitcase in the corner, dusty from lack of use. For a moment, I imagined quietly packing it. No arguments, no explanations, just leaving like a soft breeze. I thought about all the years I spent building this home with love. Now, love echoed back with silence. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady stream, like rain on a window, and somewhere between tears and deep breaths, a thought formed gently. Maybe love changes, maybe homes shift, maybe hearts grow rooms without you. Asterisk, if you're still with me on this emotional journey, please like, share, and subscribe to support my channel. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. A few mornings later, I woke up feeling unusually tired. My head ached, and my legs felt weak as I slowly walked to the kitchen. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that makes you listen too closely. My daughter Nell entered shortly after, her footsteps sharp on the floor. You woke up late, she said, glancing at the clock. I did not sleep well, I replied softly. She shrugged. Well, breakfast is already done. You can eat later. Her words were plain, but her tone cut deeper than she realized. I nodded and stepped aside, making space. I watched her prepare coffee for herself and my son, but not for me. It was subtle, but silence often holds more truth than words. After they left for work, I sat down slowly at the dining table. My hands trembled as I lifted a cup of warm water. I wondered when I stopped being part of the family's routine. When did I become something they worked around, instead of with? Around noon, I received a phone call from an old neighbor. She asked how I was doing. I hesitated before answering. Fine, I whispered, forcing a smile even though she could not see me. There was a pause. Your voice sounds tired, she said gently. I stared at the empty chair across from me. Maybe I am. She offered to visit sometime, but I told her not to worry. I did not want anyone else to witness my quiet loneliness. Later that afternoon, I began preparing dinner again. Cooking gave me purpose, even if no one noticed. As I stirred the pot, I heard the gate open. My daughter-in-law returned early, her eyebrows slightly raised when she saw me at the stove. "You cooked again?" she asked. "I told you not to." I turned slowly. "It keeps me busy." She sighed, annoyed. "But it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough. It's uncomfortable." The words stung. I had never meant to make her feel anything other than supported. I lowered the heat on the stove and stepped away. "I understand, but I didn't. Not really." That evening, we ate together, but laughter flowed around me, never toward me. I felt like a ghost at my own table. As soon as dinner ended, I stood to take the plates. My son touched my arm lightly. "Sit, Oma," he whispered. "Let her handle it." His kindness was soft, but it carried a hidden message. "You are not needed here." I sat back down slowly, folding my hands on my lap. My eyes wandered to the hallway, to the closed doors, to the suitcase sitting quietly in the corner of my room. After everyone went to sleep, I walked into the living room and turned off the last light. The house fell into darkness, except for the moonlight touching the floor. And as I stood there, surrounded by silence, one thought whispered louder than ever: maybe it is time to decide what home truly means. The next morning, I woke before everyone else. The sun had barely risen, and the house rested in a soft, gray light. I moved slowly, careful not to make noise. Something inside me felt settled, like a decision had already formed while I slept. I walked to my room and opened my closet. My clothes hung neatly, untouched except for the few I wore daily. My hands hovered over them. For a moment, I wondered if this was foolish, but the memory of whispered words returned, soft and sharp. "She makes the house feel heavy. I wish she would consider living somewhere else." My fingers tightened as I reached for my small suitcase. When I pulled it out, dust floated in the air. It had been years since I used it. I placed it gently on the bed and opened it. The zipper sounded louder than I expected, echoing in the quiet morning. I folded my clothes slowly, carefully. Memories rested in each piece. Festivals, birthdays, quiet nights at home. As I packed, I paused often, feeling the weight of each moment settle in my chest. Suddenly, footsteps approached. I closed the suitcase halfway and sat on the edge of the bed. My son peeked in. "You're awake early," he said, rubbing his eyes. I smiled. "Just organizing some things." He nodded, unaware. "We might have guessed this weekend. Maybe we can all eat together." The hope in his voice made my heart soften. But I also wondered why he only spoke of togetherness when others were around. I simply nodded, and he left the room, humming gently. When his footsteps disappeared, I exhaled a breath I did not know I was holding. Later, while everyone was at work, I continued packing. I wrapped a small frame of my son's graduation photo in a scarf. My hands lingered on the smile he wore that day. Young, confident, proud. I thought of how tightly he hugged me afterward. "You made this possible," he whispered then. Those words still warmed me, even now. After lunch, I carefully placed my medicines and shawl into the suitcase. Then, I sat down and looked around the room. It still smelled faintly of jasmine oil and old books. My home within a home, 4 walls that listened to my quiet tears. As evening approached, the doorbell rang. My daughter-in-law's sister walked in, her voice cheerful. They spoke in the living room, laughing. I stepped out to greet her. "You're still here," she said, surprised. I inhaled slowly. "Where else would I be?" She shrugged and looked away. Her expression answered my question louder than words. That night, as everyone slept, I zipped the suitcase fully. The sound felt final, like a door closing gently behind me. I whispered into the darkness, "Maybe leaving isn't abandonment. Maybe it's self-respect." I lay down beside the suitcase, fingers resting on the handle. For the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support my channel. It helps these stories reach more people who need them. A few days passed, and the silent distance between us continued to widen. No one knew about the suitcase resting under my bed. I hid it like a quiet secret, waiting for the right moment. Or maybe, waiting for courage. One afternoon, I sat alone in the living room, mending a small tear in an old shawl. My daughter-in-law and her sister were in the kitchen again, their voices hushed but not hidden. The walls carried every sound, like they were tired of keeping secrets. "She is still here," her sister muttered. My daughter-in-law sighed. "I thought she would get tired and decide to leave, but she just stays. She watches everything," her sister whispered. "It's uncomfortable." I paused, needle in hand. The thread trembled. "She has nowhere else to go," my daughter-in-law replied. "But I cannot carry her forever." This house feels crowded. My chest tightened. I held my breath, trying to steady my heartbeat. What about a senior home? Her sister suggested. My daughter-in-law stayed silent for a moment. Maybe it would be easier. The words hit harder than the first ones. A senior home. Easier. For whom? I waited for my son's voice, hoping he would defend me, stop them, say anything, but he was not there. He was working, unaware that love was being measured like weight on a shelf. Gently, I folded the shawl and walked toward my room, careful not to make a sound. The hallway felt longer than usual, like every step held a memory asking me to stay a little longer. When my son returned that evening, dinner was already prepared. He smiled and thanked me, but I noticed how quickly his wife looked away. The tension at the table was quiet but thick. I spoke only when spoken to, eating small bites slowly, forcing myself not to tremble. After dinner, my son pulled me aside. Mama, he began softly, you should rest more. Do things you enjoy. Maybe visit friends. His voice was kind, but his eyes avoided mine. He didn't know I had already packed. He didn't know I had already heard enough. I am fine, I whispered, just a little tired, that's all. That night, I sat by the window. The moonlight fell across the floor, leaving long shadows stretching toward my bed. Outside, the street was quiet, only the sound of a distant dog barking. I held the packed shawl close, remembering the warmth of small hands wrapped in it years ago. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly. Leaving was not the hard part. Loving without being loved back, that was the weight I carried. I lay down slowly, whispering to the quiet air, maybe tomorrow I will finally decide. The house slept, unaware, but my heart stayed awake. 2 mornings later, the house buzzed with quiet tension. My daughter-in-law was walking quickly from room to room, muttering under her breath. Her sister had stayed over again, and their soft conversations felt sharper than before. I moved slowly, trying not to get in their way, though simply standing seemed enough to bother them. Around noon, I heard the front door open. My son had come home early, holding a folder from work. His face looked tired in a way I had not seen since his school days. He sat on the sofa, and his wife joined him, her sister close behind. I stayed in the hallway, just out of sight. I was not trying to listen, but something inside me tightened, urging me to stay. We need to talk, his wife began. Her tone was calm but firm. My son shifted uncomfortably. About what? About your mother, she said. We need space. We need privacy. We cannot keep living like this. His voice dropped. She raised me. She has nowhere else to go. Her sister leaned forward, but she just sits there quietly, watching. It's uncomfortable. The whole house changes because of her. Silence hovered, heavy, tired. My daughter-in-law continued. I have tried to be patient, but I want a life that feels like ours, not like someone is always here. My son sighed, rubbing his forehead. I don't want to hurt her, his wife replied softly. But you are hurting me. Those 8 words changed everything. My heart beat faster. My hands shook, pressing against the wall for balance. I felt like a stranger in the home I had loved for so long. Maybe, his wife whispered, it's time she lives in a senior home. They can take care of her better than we can. His silence was the worst part. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He just breathed quietly, as if surrendering. But my chest tightened, and I stepped back slowly. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I walked to my room, closed the door gently, and sat on the bed. My suitcase stared at me like an old friend, patient and waiting. My eyes burned, but the tears would not fall, not yet. After a long moment, I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. Deep lines, tired eyes, quiet strength. I am not a burden, I whispered to my reflection. I am someone's mother. I packed the last things, my comb, my slippers, a small box of memories. Then, I folded my shawl carefully and placed it on top. Just as I zipped the suitcase, there was a soft knock on my door. My son's voice carried through the wood. Mama, can we talk? My hand froze. I knew what he wanted to say, and I knew what I needed to do. I opened my eyes, steady and clear. Love sometimes means staying, but sometimes it means leaving. When I opened the door, my son stood there with worried eyes. He looked smaller somehow, like the confident man I raised had slipped into the past. He stepped inside quietly and sat at the edge of the bed. I stayed by the wardrobe, my suitcase resting by my feet, its handle waiting. Mama, he began, voice soft. I love you, but things have been difficult lately. I nodded. For whom? His eyes fell to the floor. For everyone. That answer was heavier than the suitcase itself. He inhaled slowly. Maybe you could stay with a relative for a while, just until things calm down. I watched him carefully. The boy who once refused to let go of my hand was now asking me to let go of his home. My voice didn't shake, though my heart trembled. I heard everything, I whispered. His head shot up, shocked. What do you mean? The kitchen, the hallway, the whispers, I explained. You thought I was gone, but I heard every word. He slumped forward, shame settling on his shoulders. I didn't know what to say. And saying nothing, I replied, sometimes says the most. Silence stretched between us, not cold, just tired. After a long moment, he looked at the suitcase. You packed? Yes, I said softly, not out of anger, but out of respect for myself. His eyes filled with tears. Mama, please don't think I don't love you. I'm just trying to keep peace. I smiled sadly. Peace built on silence is not peace at all. He reached out, holding my hand like he did when he was small. For a moment, time folded, and we were in that old schoolyard again. But then he let go. My daughter-in-law entered quietly, her face pale. She didn't speak. She just stepped aside, giving me space to pass. I nodded gently to her, not forgiving everything, but understanding something deeper. People grow under different roofs. Hearts learn love differently. I wheeled my suitcase down the hallway. The walls held years of laughter, birthdays, music, quiet nights. When I reached the front door, I paused and looked back. My son whispered, "Where will you go?" "I will find somewhere," I replied. Homes are not always made of brick. He stepped forward, as if to hug me, but stopped halfway. I smiled anyway. Then, with a steady hand, I opened the door. Cool evening air brushed against my face, carrying the scent of rain. The street was quiet. A neighbor waved from across the road, offering a soft smile. I felt a strange warmth bloom inside my chest. Freedom can look a lot like loneliness, until you take the first step. As the door closed softly behind me, I whispered into the world, leaving doesn't mean I am alone. It means I remember my worth. I walked slowly, with quiet strength, suitcase rolling behind me, heart lighter than it had been in months, because sometimes, the bravest thing a heart can do is walk away gently. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support my channel.